First thing you'll notice is ease of use is dominant here. So everything is wizard-driven, drag and drop, point and click, drop-down lists. You ought to be able to navigate through this wizard in a matter of just a few minutes. Here in step one, you only have a couple of choices that you need to make. So we could give this job a name. I'll just arbitrarily call this Replication Webinar. And the second choice here is to choose what we call a connection, which will point our service to your Salesforce instance. So if I look at what that connection is all about, you'll see that basically you're providing to us a set of credentials, a Salesforce username and password that will allow us to access your Salesforce org and, of course, replicate that data locally. From that point down, it's all optional choices that you can make. Do you want to replicate everything within your Salesforce org? So all Sales Cloud objects, all Service Cloud objects, any custom objects that you may have installed by extending the Sales or Service Cloud or installing a Force.com application, or do you want to pick and choose which objects are going to be replicated? And if I choose selected, then I get a list of objects, and I can pick and choose exactly what will be replicated in this particular job. And if I scroll down, you'll notice all the common objects here. Of course, all the standard objects like accounts and contacts and leads from the Sales Cloud, and cases and case comments and things like that from the Service Cloud. So you can pick and choose, again, custom objects that may be a part of your Salesforce org, and you can make these a part of your replication job here. The other thing that you can pick and choose here, and keep in mind that there's a lot of powerful things happening behind the scenes of this user interface. So you get the representation of simple radio buttons and checkboxes, but behind the scenes, the choices you make could very well have a significant impact on exactly how we interface with Salesforce, what API calls we make, how we interact with the local database, and how we push data to it. So those are all things that are a part of this application, a part of this UI, but your experience is simply choosing radio buttons and checkboxes here. For example, do you want to include archived and deleted records that are back in Salesforce? And if you click that box, you're basically turning on a couple of API calls that will make that happen when we go back and extract that data from Salesforce. If we move on to step two, the choices here are, again, pick a connection in this case, in this step, where you want the local replicated copy. And again, in this case, I'm pointing it toward an Oracle instance, but it certainly could be SQL Server or MySQL. And if we look at the attributes of this connection, from a database perspective, it's typical information. What's the database username, the password, where is this database running? In the case of Oracle, what's the service name or SID of the database? So it's all very typical connection information. Now, the target prefix box here is an important point because it really illustrates one of the crown jewels of the Informatica replication application. And that is you get the opportunity to add a prefix to any of these objects that you're going to replicate. And the reason that's important is because this service will actually manage those target objects. So it will create the objects if they don't already exist, and it will alter and manage and maintain those objects going forward as they change over time. So you're replicating not only the data, but also the schema. That really is a significant differentiation from almost anything else we've seen out in the market, the ability to replicate that schema as well as the data. If you keep in mind that, at least in my experience, one of the big benefits of Salesforce is the flexibility that it provides. The flip side of that coin, however, is that it's very common for changes to roll into production in Salesforce on literally a weekly, daily, or even hourly basis. And when that happens, how do you keep your replication and integration jobs up to par when there's changes they were unaware of as early as 5 minutes ago? And so that's where this service really comes in handy. Now, because it's going to be creating these objects to begin with, you have the opportunity to come in and add a prefix so that there is no conflict with any existing objects if you want to use an existing database. You can also make some choices here that, again, will change our behavior but do you want to, as this runs on a schedule, do you want to simply identify incremental changes in Salesforce and move those changes over, or do you want to simply do a completely full refresh every time this service runs? And then from a target perspective, depending on what your reasons are for replicating Salesforce, you may want to remove or retain any columns and rows that were deleted back in Salesforce. If this is data getting pushed to a business intelligence environment, perhaps you want to retain those columns and rows for historical purposes and so that your historical reporting remains accurate. That's as far as I would be required to go. I could literally click on Save here after Step 1 and Step 2, and this is a valid replication job that would run, and it would run on whatever frequency you want it to. Now, with that said, there are some optional steps in the wizard here that you can choose to go through. For example, step number 3, you can come in and choose to exclude particular fields within an object. For example, here you can see the UI is intelligent. It knows I only picked 2 objects for replication, so it lists these 2 objects. And within any one of these objects, for example, account, I can come in step 3 here, and I can choose to exclude particular fields from my replication list. So, if I'm doing business intelligence reporting, chances are the free-form field for description is of no meaning to me. It's just inconsequential for reporting purposes. And so I might choose to exclude that because it's a fairly large field and it doesn't add any value. So I'm going to try to speed up my replication by eliminating that field. So that's an example of step 3. Here in step 4, somewhat similar in that you can restrict which records are now replicated. So you may have a Salesforce implementation that spans around the world, but perhaps for replication purposes, you only care about North American or U.S. data or something along those lines. And so you can arbitrarily choose to say, I only want to replicate the subset of data where the billing country field is equal to the U.S. Or perhaps it's only certain record types of data that you care about. And then lastly, you can decide when this replication is supposed to run. So will it run only when you invoke this job through the Cloud UI, or do you want to run it on some schedule? And if you do, is it a schedule you've created before? Perhaps you want to go out and create a brand new schedule right on the fly, and so I could certainly come in and do that. And I could decide when this schedule starts, what day, what time, and then what sort of schedule is it? Is it monthly? Is it weekly, daily, all the way down to every n number of hours or minutes? So every 5 minutes, every 2 hours, once a day, once a week. So I could set my schedule up here. Let's call it every day, and we'll do every day instead of just the weekdays. And we'll use that schedule for this job. We click Save, and we're done.